This is a story about the moment I witnessed a life-changing event in just one night. My name is John. I'm a regular office worker who just turned 60 this year. Although I am a department manager, I've been contemplating whether it's time to step down. Jeanette home. I have a wife of the same age and 2 daughters. Both daughters are married and have blessed me with 4 grandchildren. It's a plain life, but I believe I can spend a peaceful and happy retirement. Just by this age, I don't expect any significant changes in the direction of my life. I think many people feel the same way. Of course, I'm one of them. My life hasn't been about achieving great things, but I'm content with what I have. I thought being able to spend the rest of my days peacefully would be the greatest happiness. I think so. But it seems the triggers for significant changes in everyday life can be found in unexpected places. In my case, it was a school reunion. In the summer of the year I turned 60, I received an invitation to a middle school reunion, thinking that. I vaguely recall discussing having reunions at our coming of age and 60th birthdays when we graduated from middle school. But after more than 40 years, I hadn't expected it to actually happen, and I had completely forgotten about it. However, the prospect of meeting old friends after decades was very appealing, and I was eager to attend. This was encouragement from my wife. I decided to go to the middle school reunion. Little did I know then the unexpected events that were to unfold. When I arrived at the spacious private room of the restaurant hosting the reunion, I was one of the first to arrive, but only one other person was there. Having last seen each other at our coming-of-age ceremony 40 years ago, I couldn't recognize who it was. When I timidly spoke up, the other person said this, "Mike stems. It's been a while." Mike, hearing that name, I felt an unpleasant memory I had almost forgotten resurfacing. Mike and I were in the same class in the 2nd and 3rd years of middle school. He was a perfect all-rounder, good in both academics and sports, and even served as the student council president. He was also popular with the girls because of his good looks. However, he was quite disliked among the boys. The reason was, "Hey John, lend me that handout." This one. As I sat down at my desk in the morning and held the homework handout. Mike said that to me. He almost forcibly took the handout I had, erased my name written in the name field, and wrote his own over it.
Yeah, because that's no right. A plain and short guy like you just needs to listen to what I write. Or swap the gorgeous line aster. I think you bring your homework or not, your lousy grades won't change. Hashtag we're workler. I got the kind of guys who would forcefully push his own way.
It was clearly an unfair and wrong act, but he was a popular figure with power within the school. As a middle school student at the time, facing such overwhelming influence, I couldn't protest any further. Mike generally had this attitude towards most of the boys, but it seemed I was particularly targeted. I was often sent on unnecessary errands to the school store, had my lunch thrown away, and sometimes even had money taken from me. But he was smart. He never did anything that left evidence, maintaining his position until graduation. After middle school, we went to different high schools, and I remember he didn't attend the reunion at the coming-of-age ceremony because he was studying abroad. He was the last person I wanted to see again, yet here we were meeting after 40 years. Now, both of us are stepping into old age, 40 years later. I didn't want to believe that childish bullying would happen again, but the fear ingrained in my heart made my body tense involuntarily.
Into you again. That's how have you been, well?
Ignoring my tension, Mike greeted me with a smile, and I felt relieved inside. Indeed, time seems to heal all wounds, or so I thought, but I was wrong.
Just kidding. Who are you again? Who are you again? A jar, us idiot. Unfortunately, Sabarstas are us though. Gosh beast, I don't remember insignificant side characters.
Mike's voice echoed loudly in the still sparsely populated room. I felt the unpleasant sensation of sweaty palms, a feeling I remembered from decades ago. Mike hadn't changed at all, no matter how much time had passed, but similarly, I hadn't changed much either, unable to retort. I tried to just smile it off, when suddenly, hearing this voice from the door, I turned to look. There stood an elderly man, unrecognizable due to the passage of time. But somehow, I knew who he was. He was the only one who had extended a helping hand to me during our middle school days. "Edward, is that you?"
When I guessed the name of the person, he replied, "Yeah, it's me. Such a long time no see." He came towards me, naturally distancing me from Mike.
Edward had always been kind to me when I was down because I couldn't stand up to Mike, punching Edward and me. Mike laughed and said, "Ah, I remember now. At the doll duo pretending to be friends. Even after 40 years, you haven't changed a bit, leading such low-level lives."
As a company president with status and fame, it's like a different world to me.
At 60, I never thought I'd feel the need to prove myself or avoid losing to someone. But being sarcastically spoken to like that, I felt a mix of frustration and shame. But I've never been good at talking back. Edward, being a kind soul, never argued and just quietly moved away from Mike, and we tried to forget the unpleasantness together. The dynamic hadn't changed easily over time.
Isn't there no level in life? Everyone's different, so there's no need to compare.
Edward Rudd replied in a remarkably calm tone. Surprised? I looked at Edward. It seemed Mike was equally surprised and quickly came back with a rebuttal.
People who lead bottom-tier lives justify themselves like that? Yeah! Lie. Otherwise, they'd feel miserable enough to die. The only finished male cool.
Mike had always been good at striking where it hurts. But Edward, unlike me, seemed different now.
I don't know what you consider a significant job, but I believe I fulfilled my duty until my recent retirement.
Edward said this proudly. But Mike continued, being forced to retire already in an era where the retirement age is 65. That's proof you're useless. Stop pretending already. Mike sneered as he said this, but then other classmates arrived and the conversation ended there. In the past, I would have only felt frustrated, but now it was different. Edward's presence made me feel somewhat relieved. It turned out to be a pleasant reunion after all. Everyone was so aged that we couldn't recognize each other until introductions were made. As the drinks flowed and the evening progressed, we slowly recaptured our old feelings. Though it started with reopening old wounds, I was glad I came. I ended up sitting next to Edward for the duration of the event. So we talked about what each of us had been up to during the time we hadn't seen each other. We talked about what we had been up to, work family. We weren't talkative people originally, but after 40 years, we had had endless conversations. Edward had changed in many ways, like being able to stand up to Mike, but his fundamentally kind and gentle nature remained the same. That was somewhat reassuring. As the evening drew to a close, Mike, emboldened by alcohol, began loudly boasting about his exploits, despite being somewhat distant from Edward and me. Mike, perhaps still affected by the earlier incident, kept directing his attention our way.
I'm now the owner of a top-tier hotel. Everyone surely knows its name. Since I was always excellent from a young age, everyone must have expected me to achieve something. But to attain a status beyond expectations and make my classmates proud, right? I would be armed.
Mike insisted on bragging, always steering the conversation our way.
That's incredible indeed.
Edward responded, showing his magnanimity in acknowledging Mike's success. This seemed to irk Mike, who continued his sarcasm.
That's because we're classmates. I can't give you any special treatment. It's a hotel too expensive for poor people like you. Slight leave to bother. It's meant for the real elite.
Yet, Edward, unfazed, simply replied, "I see, got it."
I wondered how Edward had acquired such firm resolve. I was genuinely curious about it. It was a question I just couldn't get out of my mind. Just annoyed that Edward didn't take the bait. Mike then began a more dubious tale.
You can't pop the industry just by doing regular business. I can simpletons even have imagined how I climbed to the top.
He posed the question to our classmates, and seeing everyone tilting their heads in confusion, he seemed quite satisfied. Then, he uttered words that should never have been said.
You keep it hidden. If you hide it well, tax evasion or anything else is easy or chew. The least smart people like me can climb up high. Shh. Or you guys probably don't have the guts for it. That's why you're great as poor ordinary people.
Mike, drunk and red-faced, seemed to enjoy this conversation. The other classmates just listened with dismay. That's quite a story. I muttered softly to Edward. Then, I realized something important. It's once I had realized it, I couldn't just stay silent, so I immediately stood up. Mike, you should probably stop talking about that. I could feel the blood drain from my face in this unexpected situation. But I doubt anyone around me could guess why I was so anxious, except for Edward sitting next to me. However, Mike ignored this final warning and continued to recount his misdeeds as if they were tales of valor.
I stand hearing about a world so different from yours. Pathetic.
Despite the seriousness of the situation, I didn't want to justify criminal behavior or defend Mike, who had been a nuisance since middle school. But the more Mike spoke, the more he sweated. Unable to bear it any longer, I interrupted him.
Hey, that's my night's bet for any test at all. Edward was a high-ranking police officer. I'm just that you keep going.
My words echoed in the hall, silencing everyone. Mike, who had been enjoying his story, turned pale.
Edward then stood up and said, as I mentioned earlier, I've always taken pride in my job and fulfilled my duty. That pride doesn't change even after retirement. I can't overlook such talk of wrongdoing. Appropriate action will be taken.
Gathering his belongings, Edward prepared to leave. Mike, his earlier bravado gone, desperately followed Edward. Wait, we're classmates, right? It was just a joke to liven up the mood. Please overlook it. I beg you.
And classmates or not, I can't give you special treatment. You said that yourself earlier. We'll see if it's a lie or not after an investigation. Goodbye.
As Edward walked away, Mike collapsed to the ground. Weeks later, Mike's company was raided by the police. Indeed, they found evidence of tax evasion, just as he had boasted, leading to his arrest. I heard about this when I met with Edward later. That's when I asked him something I'd been curious about, how he had gained such strong willpower. The idea of Edward, who had only a middle school education and was average in studies, becoming a high-ranking police officer had initially shocked me. I was deeply interested in what had happened to him after graduating from middle school, and his answer was something I never expected.
After middle school, when you, my friend, were being bullied, I too couldn't do anything to help. The feeling of helplessness and shame stayed with me. I couldn't dream or envision a future for myself. So after graduating, I left home and wandered aimlessly, essentially becoming homeless. Then a police officer approached me. As we talked, I was inspired to become strong, to right wrongs, and to protect others. I wanted to become someone who could defend a friend in trouble. So in a way, it's thanks to you, John. Shazan.
No way, that's exaggerating. I guess I need to be a bit stronger myself.
How about I teach you some self-defense next time? We can't have you getting mugged now, can we?
The long-held thoughts of a friend who's supposed to be closest to me, spanning decades. Knowing this made me incredibly happy. Once you reach the age of 60, it's easy to think that people's lives don't change significantly anymore. That's what I believed, but I was wrong. The paths we take in our 60 years of life, for better or worse, diverge, and this is likely the same whether we're 70 or 80, at styrist constrictions, so I'll continue to walk a straight path, even if it's ordinary, one that I won't be ashamed of in front of others. Reuniting with an old friend made me realize this.